Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of World Wildlife Journeys. I'm your host, Russell Gammon, and today with me in the studio, figuratively, because he's in Europe, freezing to death, is a very dear friend of mine from way back when. His name is Rory Young. He runs his own conservation organization called Chengeta Wildlife. Rory's background initially was in the military, and then he worked together with me as a guide for many years. And through Chengeta Wildlife, he's found a way to combine these two skill sets, doing what he loves, preserving the wildlife, but actually using the skill sets that he learned in the military. And he's doing some really unbelievably interesting work in a very, very difficult corner of the world. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is his work in the Sahel region of North Africa. And he's doing in particular a conservation program there involved with the desert elephants. This is a population of relic African elephants that have been cut off there and isolated. And they somehow have adapted over years and through accumulation of knowledge to be able to live in this incredibly inhospitable environment. So I hope you'll enjoy today's presentation. And Rory, what an absolute pleasure to see you, my friend.
Thank you. Likewise, the pleasure is all mine. Good to see you again, Russell. And I love chatting with you, as I always have for many, many years. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys don't know this, but when Rory and I get together to chew the fat, man, we can go down some serious rabbit holes. So we're going to try and stay on message today.
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about your work in that Sahel region. In particular, talk to us a little bit about this elephant population. What is it that makes it so unique? I mean, it's a tiny fraction of animals living in the middle of nowhere. Why is it important that we preserve this particular population?
Okay. So we've been in the Sahel for the last 5-6 years now. 7 years in West Africa, and we work in Mali, especially Burkina Faso, and then down in Central African Republic, and then some developing projects elsewhere in that region. Also in the Congo Basin and DRC and other areas, but obviously for the purposes of this discussion, it's primarily Mali and Burkina Faso. The Malian desert adapted elephants are a relic population of African bush elephants that are highly adapted to living in this incredibly harsh environment. So Sahel means shore, or seashore in Arabic, and means figuratively where the desert meets the savanna. So the shore of the desert shore. And that is, of course, an ecotone. So going from one ecosystem into another. Ecotones are very fragile and very varied in their climates and the effects of that. So in this area, what happens is these elephants, and there's only roughly 300 left, migrate throughout the year in search of food and water. And the way that works is when the rains come, and it's a short wet season in the Sahel, they move into Burkina Faso, the northern part of Burkina Faso, and they're pretty dispersed into subgroups of herds, subherds. But during the dry season, they move up north, right up into the desert in a circular migration up towards close to Timbuktu, down towards Mopti in the central Mali, and then back down into Burkina Faso. And what they're doing is they're moving from water point to water point, because at each water point, they can survive there until the food is depleted before moving on to the next water point. So they're actually in search of food, and they are limited by the location where they can get water. Otherwise, they would move further away. But these animals are incredibly adapted. Although DNA tests have now shown that they are not a distinct species. They are highly adapted. And for example, will go up to 3 days without water, which is quite incredible for an African.
Yeah, that is amazing. And that adaptability, as we were discussing before we started the video, you know, what we're discovering about these elephants is that, especially in these extremely austere environments, that in fact their ability to survive and thrive in those environments is actually related to knowledge that's passed down from generation to generation. So we used to think this was just programmed instinctively, they know what to do. But what we're finding is that, you know, if you take out all of the older animals, which poaching is doing in some areas, you sometimes snap that chain. And then if there's a drought, whereas before we believed they instinctively knew where to go, now they're not going because they just don't know. And this is something quite profound when you think about it. I mean, passed on knowledge is supposed to be our game, right? As humans, that's what makes us different. You know, we write books and pass on knowledge, which gets accumulated generation upon generation. But if the elephants are doing this, then actually maybe elephants cannot survive in that environment without that knowledge, in which case what's in those elephants' heads becomes almost more important to preserve than their DNA.
Absolutely. So, for example, there is no way you could put a group, you could relocate elephants from another area to this environment and expect them to survive. They'll die. And part of the explanation is, of course, that these elephants have been there since a wetter period. And as it dried up, the memory of where there was year-round water was passed on, so that these elephants know where to find it. There are also physical adaptations, but it is very much that acquired knowledge. Elephants, you know, the saying, an elephant never forgets, is not nonsense. They use a large portion of their brain for memory. They have a emotional memory as akin to humans. So they suffer from PTSS, for example. Baby elephants die more easily than a human baby if they're not given care of their own parent, and they can't identify with that. Even if you mimic all the actions with another elephant, where you do everything right, they can drop dead. So their memory is very important, and for obvious reasons, so that they can learn, they can remember, they can survive through knowledge being passed on by the older generations. Yes.
It's absolutely incredible. And talk to us a little bit about the area where you're working, because the Sahel presents some very, very specific and very unique and very, very challenging conditions to any kind of conservation effort or any kind of relief effort. I mean, it is probably one of the toughest places on earth, I imagine, to try and do the sort of work that you do. So talk to us a little bit about why that is and what's going on in that area, because it is in the news a lot.
It is. So it's definitely, I think, one of the harshest environments I've ever worked in, for a number of reasons. The climate, it is, central Mali is arguably the hottest place on earth. So Bear, Timbuktu, that area, they've recorded regularly, routinely, most years it's well over 50 degrees centigrade. It is in addition to being where two ecosystems meet, it is also where different cultures meet. So the Tuareg people, the Tamashek from the north, desert Berber people, meet in this area of the desert elephant habitat with the sedentary people of the south, the Dogon, the sub-Saharan Africans. And also, you also have groups that migrate between those regions and those cultures, such as the Fulani people, and others who live alongside, such as the Songhai and so on. There's even, believe it or not, a group called the Arma, who are descendants of Irish, Cornish, and Andalusian mercenaries from the 16th century, who were sent down there. It's incredible.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
So if you come across an O'Malley's pub in Timbuktu, you know who put that up. Anyway, so you've got this melting pot. This is where cultures are meeting. This is where climates are meeting. This is where religions are meeting. Islam from the north, animism in the south, and Christianity. And obviously, when you have change in an environment like that, it creates an immediate domino effect or ripple. So if, for example, such as is happening right now, in the northern part, amongst the Tamashek, there is less, well, not necessarily less rainfall over the year, but it comes down quicker than it used to. So they count the number of rains. A Tamashek will say to you, Tuareg will say to you, oh, we've had 3 rains this year. It was a bad year. Last year we had 4. What that means is it's coming down. The annual rainfall is the same, but it's coming down quicker. So it's not penetrating. It's running off.
Lumps, yeah.
Absolutely, and it's not being captured in reservoirs. So what that means is obviously those people are under pressure, so they move. On top of that, you have cultural change. So perceptions have changed of wealth. So you have vast herds of cattle. And our partners, Mali Wild Foundation, the Mali Elephant Project, did research in the past where they found 80% of those cattle are owned by the elites in the capital and serve no purpose. They're just purely status. So you can imagine more and more people upwardly mobile if there's this pressure or this imperative to rise socially as opposed to stay in your strata, then you want to display that wealth. So you now need cattle, and you need a Humvee, you need a cell phone, and all the rest of it. So there's increased pressure. So there's minimal resources to survive on in the first place in such an environment. And then you're adding more pressure, more population, more expectations. And what that means is when one group is under pressure, it'll often move into another group's area. So for example, the Fulani are pushing into the Congo Basin with their cattle because there's just not enough grazing in the areas they come from, where they normally would move. And immediately they're, of course, coming into conflict with sedentary peoples. So in Mali, this means conflict between the Fulani people, the Pearl, and the Dogon. And these are the massacres you read about in Mali. So for us, this environment is ethnic conflict, religious conflict, political conflict. And amongst all of that, we're trying to protect these elephants. And so there's a war. You know, there's been a war since there was the Tuareg rebellion, then the subsequent jihadist takeover, and then what's known as the reconquest by the French allied forces and the government forces, and then the ongoing terrorist war and ethnic conflict. Here's the incredible thing about the elephants. They are a unifying factor. So if I talk to, doesn't matter what group, what ethnicity, what tribe, what language group, and I say, do you like elephants? The universal response across political, religious, ethnic boundaries is absolutely. So to the Dogon, elephants are sacred. They believe they have human flesh. They're taboo, you can't touch them. The Tamashek, the Tuareg people say they are a sign of prosperity, blessing, and they will have a party, celebrate when the elephants come through one of their nomadic camps. And the Fulani say, very practically, elephants improve the health of our livestock. And that's most likely because they're knocking down pods from the trees when there's little food, and the livestock are able to eat them. So they produce more milk and so on. So to everyone sees them as important. And it's also the reason those elephants are there. The elephants are not there because these people didn't get around to killing them. The elephants are there because there used to be elephants across the Sahel and were wiped out. So the ivory that the ancient Romans had, believe it or not, came from the Niger River, that area. The Romans came down to the Niger because they understood this was a source of wealth. The richest man in history, okay, was what's his name? Musa Mansour, the the head of the emperor of the Malian Empire,
Mm.
who decreased the world's currency when he went to Mecca. Along the way, he was giving away so much gold. He caused a huge problem with inflation. So he came on the way back. He bought it all back. So that gives you an idea. This is not an area that was isolated from other regions like the Americas were until the conquistadors came along and invaded, and southern Africa until the Portuguese and others started moving in. This was very much connected to the Middle East and to Europe, and therefore the elephants were wiped out to feed a trade, to feed this need for ivory. So initially, this is where the ivory was taken from, and then later it came from the coasts and southern and Africa and the interior. So these elephants survived all of that.
Yeah.
And they are there today because they've been protected by these communities. So for us, protecting them, and our partners, especially Wild Foundation, who work with the communities, it's about reinforcing traditional beliefs and perceptions of the
elephant. There's a desire there on the ground to have the elephant there, which is great, because the truth is, as you know, in Southern Africa, mostly that's not the case. They don't want the elephants there. There's too many of them. They eat the crops. So it's a wonderful change around to be in an environment where the local people are open-minded and want those elephants to be there. I'm guessing, just circling back to that set of circumstances that you described to us about what is the problem in the Sahel region, I'm guessing that all of this is going to be complicated and compounded by global warming, because that area is likely to get absolutely hammered.
Absolutely, and it is being hammered. I mean, we've got so the work we do in Mali is as Chengeta is training, mentoring, advising the combined army forestry anti-poaching unit that is dedicated to protecting the elephants and the habitat in this and other species in this region.
So how specifically do you do that? You do what? You go in with a team of people and you roll out a training program, you assess the needs, and basically draw up a plan of
needs assessment is the first step. So of course you can't come up with any plan for anything unless you understand the problem and you develop realistic solutions. And then of course you go through the process of assessing the work you've done and adjusting your plan. So what we do is we bring together Chengeta generally, I'm not talking specifically, so our partners in Mali, Wild Foundation, are focused on the community aspect. In that environment, we are focused on the development of the doctrine, and by that I don't mean religious doctrine, I mean the methodology that the unit uses for stopping, deterring, preventing poaching. So what we do is we bring together analytics experts, investigations experts, tactical security experts, and sociocultural experts. So what we're looking at is understanding, for example, let's step away from the Sahel specifically and just generally, there are different reasons people poach. It's not only because for greed. It's not only because they are organized criminal organization trying to get ivory to ship it to Asia. There are people who are hungry, starving, in which case arresting them is not going to change anything.
No.
They poverty alleviation or other solutions are needed for that. Sometimes it's ignorance. So for example, in a park in another part of West Africa, in Guinea, we were training rangers and in operations, and we said, right, what's going on with this particular area where there was a lot of poaching? And it's these hunters, and they cross in and they poach, and they go back to the hunting area, where the traditional hunting area where they're allowed to hunt, and it's blah blah blah. It's difficult to catch them. So we said, well, why are they crossing? Has anyone asked them the question? Because unless you're engaging with the community and you have a relationship where information is exchanging, and with the community as a community, you're not going to know. So when they sat down with them, the solution was very simple. No one knew where the park boundary was. They weren't deliberately, they were just hunting, and they would cross and they would come back, and no one had ever been able to show them where the park boundary was with that. So that's one example. In another case, in Malawi, there's the Yao people are Muslim, and of course wouldn't eat elephant meat. But we found in an area which was Yao, they were killing elephants, and I say Malawi, not Mali. This is the other end of Africa, using pit traps. So they would dig a inverted bell-shaped hole in the ground, hide it. The elephant would be driven into it or fall into it, and be stuck. And then we found they were spearing them, but they weren't touching the ivory. So they weren't obviously not killing these elephant for the tusks, but yet they're Muslim, so they're not supposed to be eating elephant meat. But the way they were dying was the clue. They were bleeding them out, as you would kill an animal for halal, to make it halal.
Yeah.
So when we spoke to the religious leaders, we sat down with the religious leaders and said, what's going on here? And they say, well, these people are ignorant. They think they're making elephant meat halal. So of course, there's two solutions to that problem. One is these people are so hungry, they're desperate, they're actually trying to bend their religious rules to feed themselves and their families. So one is poverty alleviation, food assistance, and so on. The second one was education. The religious leaders to explain to the people that you can't make an elephant halal. It is haram. So once they did that, poaching stopped. They would not, well, I said the poaching emanating from that area stopped.
Yeah.
So understanding the problem requires real expertise and knowledge of the environment, so the terrain, the human geography, and the dynamics of the different ethnic groups and the societies, as well as so that you can understand what the generators are of the problem. So human-wildlife conflict is another one. Sometimes people are just trying to protect themselves, and they believe the best way to protect their children from lion is to go and kill all the lions in an area. So understanding the problem is crucial. So analytics, investigations, research, all of that is critical to understanding the problem, so you can then develop the right solutions for that problem.
So would it be fair to say that your approach is that old SAS doctrine of hearts and minds, of going into the communities and finding out what's really going on before you just come in with a hammer and an anvil and start sorting things out? It's just getting to the root of what the real cause of the problem is.
Absolutely. So we take an intelligence-driven approach. I don't like the dirty I word. You can call it research and driven approach, and a community-based approach, and you harmonize those. So what's interesting in Mali is that the Wild Foundation, the Mali Elephant Project, our partners, had been working for 6 to 8 years with the communities and had stopped the poaching. There was virtually no poaching. There was peace and harmony with the wildlife, with the elephants. They were protecting habitat. They were assisting the communities. And it's not community conservation. It's not, here's a bag of beads, don't kill the elephants, or here's a bowl of soup. It goes far beyond that. As we were talking about understanding the cultural beliefs, understanding the fears, the problems, and really working with those communities so that they understand that they are involved, that it's their environment. And of course, they live closer to the environment, so they have a better understanding of most people who live in urban and first world countries. So it's intelligence driven, it's pragmatic, and it's highly objective. We're not going to spend money, waste lives, waste time on anything that is not going to both protect the wildlife and also protect the local population. There is a problem all over Africa and the world with rangers and others, law enforcement officials, committing abuse in and around parks. It's totally unacceptable and it's unnecessary. It does not help, and it is not needed in order to stop the poaching. It's counterproductive. So we put human rights first. community engagement, respect, and it works. It's not. It goes beyond just the hearts and minds of the military.
Yeah.
It's very much partnership, working hand in hand, and it truly works. So what we believe is that should come first. If you can't deal with that, and this is what happened in Mali, you then are dealing with your hardcore criminal or violent individuals who are the exception to the rule. They are not the reasonable man or woman in society. So in Mali, in 2012, there was a rebellion. Wild Foundation had been successfully working with the communities. And then once there were conflict began, excuse my French, all the ourselves appeared and started poaching the elephants.
Yeah.
So the question was, first of all, how do we support the communities to get in control of the situation without now escalating a conflict or creating conflict? Because you can put a water hole in the ground or a borehole and start a war in this environment between different ethnic groups, which is exactly what has happened.
Yeah.
And how do you go about dealing with the criminal elements without alienating the population and doing so in such a way that you support them? And that's been the real challenge for us.
That's a delicate task, that is.
Yeah. And of course, keeping our guys alive, because they're a target, because they are represent government. And if someone is fighting the government,
they've got a target on their back. Now, your team are working in, just give us a sense of the scale of this place, because, you know, these elephants move over vast areas. It's not like in a typical conservation scenario, you've got a bunch of rangers who are plonked down in a park and they got their little house and they got their wife living with them. And so this is logistically is off the charts in terms of what you guys are doing.
It is. So the elephants move 3,500 kilometers in a year through their migratory pattern. Our area of operations, I can't tell you how many men in the unit, but the area of operations is the size of Switzerland. And that means, you know, there are also some elephants that hang around. As you know, males will often, if they can find a patch of food to survive on year round, they'll stick around there. So there are areas where the elephants hang around. But the elephants are moving, of course, and the people are moving, because a lot of them are nomadic. The Tamashek and the Fulani people are moving.
I hadn't thought about that.
Moving.
Yeah. So everybody's moving.
Everyone's moving. So, and it varies. So, for example, the Tamashek, when there is, they start to see they are destroying their environment. They'll up their camp and move off. The Fulani tend to stay until it's depleted, and then they never come back to that place, whereas the Tuareg will. But they're often crossing paths, and they, whilst they don't see a piece of land as being belonging to an individual, they see direction. So in other words, between you and me, your clan and my clan, there's this is my direction, that's your direction. When we meet with our livestock or whatever, that's the border, that's the boundary. The problem is when there's pressure and those nomadic people move into a sedentary area, and of course their cattle or their goats just go straight into the crops. Because they don't understand, I don't know, you should put a wall around there to stop the animals coming in. Of course, that is a major reason for the conflict and the massacres occurring in
this is an old story. It goes back to the Wild West, the homesteaders and the cattle ranchers. I mean, it was the subject of every other Western I ever watched as a kid growing up. Farmers against livestock owners, never a pretty thing.
No, exactly. And it's extremely difficult to deal with, extremely difficult. Sometimes there are no winners, and there is not an obvious solution to the problem. It takes compromise by all parties. So
it also, I imagine, takes enormous courage and strength of conviction to keep going, because it's kind of a thankless task. You're not in the limelight here. You're not, doing the easy work in the Okavango, where there's lots of investment dollars and lots of, you really have chosen a tough nut up there in a very difficult part of the world. So that's kudos to you, my friend.
Thank you. I'm extremely proud of my team. We have a team of people who go into the most dangerous environments, often alone, on their own, unsupported, and they put their lives at risk. And I'll be quite honest with you, we rarely see anyone else. You don't see all these famous organizations and famous individuals out there. Like you say, they are in the celebrity parks where they belong. This is truly about doing what you believe, or what you can, because it's right, not because it's going to make you famous or make you wealthy. Trust me, when you're sitting in a desert, 50 degrees plus, wondering if you're going to get blown up, shot, kidnapped, or just vanish forever, it's not worth all the money in the world, especially when you're away from your home, your family, your friends, and you're doing it for extended periods of time. It takes real dedication, and I'm extremely proud of my team. They're in places from Congo rainforest to deserts, and they go in willingly, passionately, and responsibly, and they achieve unparalleled results, and both in terms of protecting the wildlife and protecting the communities. So yeah, I'm extremely proud of that.
Rory, I think we're going to have to end, my friend, because you said that you've got other things you got to get to, but that's a wonderful note to end on. And for those of you who are watching this, if you'd like to learn more about Rory and his organization, in the show notes below the video, there'll be a link that you can click on to take you to see more of the work that they do. And it's been my absolute privilege to spend some time with you and to introduce you to some of our followers. And I hope that you stay safe, and good luck with that Iron Man, rather you than
yeah, that's gonna be a lot of pain and suffering that I'm definitely gonna be wondering about. But hey, once you're committed, what can you do?
Right. That sounds like my friend Rory Young. Thank you very much, my friend.
Right. Thanks, Russell. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.